So what is the state of my yarn hutch today? About a year ago, I downsized my yarn hutch from a really big, nice white hutch that I loved, but it was so big and it just kind of took up our living room. So I downsized into this smaller green hutch and it worked really well for a while. However, I'm not the only knitter in our house anymore. I have two girls who also knit. So we've been kind of keeping their projects on the lowest shelf. It's gotten a little bit out of hand. It's a little bit messy now that three people are sharing the hutch. So to give you a little bit of reference, this is the sunroom. And actually, if I step right up to here where the camera actually is, that's the dining room. So the sunroom has always had a hard time kind of having one singular purpose. And so for a while, I was able to have this be my knitting studio, and it was just where I had yarn. It's where the computer is, so I could edit videos and write patterns and all that. Well, I have very crafty girls and they're home with me all day. We homeschool, and so I have shared the space, but I've also shared specifically this yarn hutch with them. They are allowed to ask to borrow needles. They're allowed to ask to look through books. They're allowed to ask about yarn, although I will say at this moment, we were passed down so much yarn from my mom that it doesn't all fit in this hutch. And so that's part of what I want to go through right here now is trying to figure out how to make my knitting world blend with their knitting and crafting world, because we have limited space. We're in a pretty small farmhouse and there are 6 of us. So how do I not squish their crafting dreams, whether it's knitting or, as you can see, they're very into sewing lately, and also have space for my own hobby. So we're kind of just trying to figure out how to go through all this. So as you can see on the floor, that's supposed to mostly be the sewing half. This is more the office-y half. Whoops. This at the moment, honestly, if you can see, we got handed down a lot of thank you cards and just lots of different cards that don't have a place because there's not really an office. And then over here specifically is the yarn hutch. Now, as you can see, it's become a lot more than what I ideally would like. There's old school, I don't even know, iPods, old school iPods. Down here in particular, this is the one that I share with the girls. I obviously have books, but I kind of have this tray here, and I'm trying to limit them because they'll work on so many projects at once if they can, and then not finish anything. So I want to have them focus on one thing at a time. I'm not sure. I don't have a basket. I have a tray, and as you can see, it doesn't work great because not much fits in them. All right, in the drawer is not much better. It's gotten actually pretty crazy. This is supposed to be patterns, and it's patterns I wrote and patterns that I've printed. So this actually should really be in here. I've got my needles, circular needles that aren't part of that set. It's just a lot of mess. All right, inside the drawer or inside the cabinets, again, not much better. It's not messy, it's just, it's unused. It's not being used well. So this is what I was working on. These are my finished stockings. This is a project I started and then I'm not finishing because I actually don't want to make it. This is the yarn for the stockings. In here is different things for, let's see, it's like the yarn swift and ball winder. It's different things for filming, random headphones, sock blockers. It's kind of like knitting accessories and things for taking videos and photos. Back here's the rest of my yarn swift. This is bare yarn. I don't actually have a plan for it. Okay, if you're like me, you might be feeling like this is a very this is a vanity project. It's not really important in the grand scheme of things of where we are in the world, and how I organize my yarn is not that important, and what yarn I keep or not is not that important unless it's something I need because we're in a barter and trade sort of society. But I don't think anyone's going to want to trade for my junky acrylic yarn. But for me, organizing and decorating is kind of, I guess, a way that I keep my mind and my hands busy. And so if I'm feeling a certain way about life, then I feel like it's a good way to be productive and not just scroll on my phone and, you know, ruminate over things in the world. So it's not important, but in a way, I suppose it is, mental health wise. I suppose it is um, a good way to kind of have that outlet and create space in your head and create beauty. So don't let anyone tell you that knitting is not an important thing, or organizing your yarn or decorating your house or baking beautiful, yummy treats is not important in certain times of our life, because I think they all have their place and they all kind of help ground us in a sort of way. It's a creative outlet. It's kind of healing in certain ways. So read your Bible and knit and organize your yarn. The way that I ended up sorting my yarn underneath the bottom half of the hutch is that I categorized it by season. And so the very first basket that I did was pretty much, I know it's not its own season weather-wise, but I did Christmas yarn. So this is kind of a Christmas yarn color palette. And most of the yarn is worsted weight. There's some fingering weight. There's some DK weight. I don't think there's any sport weight, but pretty much those different yarn weights. And I just felt like those colors together inspired me. I don't have a specific project for each one, but I thought the mix of red and greens, a little bit of gold and some browns and a little bit of cream colors, I felt like that was like a good old-fashioned Christmas yarn color palette. So that's the first basket. And again, it's not for any specific project. I have projects that I'll be working on at Christmas time right now, but it's just how I wanted to organize the yarn this time. Instead of by weight or anything like that, I'm just going to do seasonal. Now we are getting into the wool. So this is yarn that I feel good about them using. It's natural fibers, it's not plasticky things. What happened was I had these yarns that were acrylic and different plasticky things, and they were wound around other yarn, and it was like spiky parts poking out and wiry things, and I was like, I don't want them to knit with this. I don't want to knit something for them with it and then they wear, and I don't want them to knit with it. So that's kind of where that is coming from. All right, this is the bin that I kind of referenced of yarn that's under my bed. I actually had 2 bins this same size under my bed, and I was able to empty out one of them. The other one is empty, but this one kind of needs to stay under my bed for now. It's the yarn, there's not a lot of different types of yarn, but it's the yarn that has more sweater quantities, just bigger yardage for bigger projects. So that will take up a lot of space. And like I said, it's not a huge variety of yarn, but it does take up a lot of space. So that does go under my bed. And if anyone recognizes this yarn, please let me know in the comments, because my husband gave it to me as a present and I cannot figure out what this yarn is because I didn't keep the label. Anyway, that was just some bare yarn that I have saved for dyeing yarn, and I'm going to just slide it back under my bed. Now, this yarn is some of the old acrylic stuff that I had. I got this idea from my mom. I thought I will let my preschooler practice her cutting skills. And so she actually cut this stuff up. The yarn was just scrap yarn already. Please don't think that we're just cutting it up and throwing it away. We're actually going to use it and have been using it for stuffing, for sewing projects, knitting and crocheting projects, because my girls fly through stuffing like crazy. So since this is already stuff we knew we weren't going to knit with, we wanted to somehow be useful in how we did use it instead of just tossing it. And so, yeah, this is just a lot of stuffing. We are back several days later, and I've done a little bit here and there as far as the yarn that was in my bedroom and bringing it out and just kind of corralling all of it. This stuff out here, I'm just trying to kind of wade through. So I guess what I'm going to do first is look at pumpkin yarn. We'll look at pumpkin yarn first. So we were given a lot of extra yarn that my girls were making knit pumpkins with. However, I don't want this out in our usual stash of yarn. So I'm going to put it in a plastic bag. I'm going to write pumpkin yarn on it, and then it's going to actually just go in our fall like decorations bin. I won't even have to think about it, look at it, wonder where it is. It's just going to be in there until that time comes next year when we're decorating our house for fall, and it'll just be there. Now the solution that I might have come up with for on top of the yarn hutch are these two wire baskets. They're pretty good size. That's going to hold one project with lots of extra space, and even if their project is a blanket, I think that that's going to hold it really well. So let's see if it fits on the hutch. I cannot fit all the yarn that I use and all of the yarn that they use in one hutch. I just can't. It just doesn't work. I can't even fit all of my yarn in there, all of it except for that big bin of, like I said, like garment or scarf amounts of yarn, shawl amounts of yarn. Everything besides that does fit in the yarn hutch now. However, the girls' yarn doesn't. All right, I'm willing to admit defeat. I cannot fit all of the kids' yarn in my yarn hutch. So this little plastic thing was already in here. I'm taking out all of the sewing stuff, felt stuff, and Cricut stuff. So in this bag is just all the wool or cotton. For example, these are some Rowan cotton balls of yarn in here. It's a lot of stuff that if they have a project they're going to work on and they don't have a current project, they can come choose. It's colors that I don't typically save for projects for myself. They're kind of bright or just very, I'm not sure what the right word is, but it's yarn that I want to save for me to knit kid projects or for them to choose a yarn from, if that makes sense. I have a lot of yarn and I don't want to have this much yarn. I want to save room for the yarn that really matters here. But we're going to save the good stuff. We're going to save the wool. Here's where we're at. We've got a bag to pass on to my mom and sister, a bag to donate, and then a bag for our friends' kids who just learned to knit. And so I'm going to offer some different yarns for them also. All right, the yarn hutch is clean and I'm going to decorate it again. I do have 2 baskets up here for the 2 separate projects, but then I did quickly switch over to one because I still wasn't having room on that main part for my yarn swatch practices. This is just a really pretty basket of little pieces of yarn that I got from Tony at The Fold. She, up in Marengo, Illinois, she was having people practice spinning and gave me this bag of yarn for free, which was very sweet of her. And it's such small amounts that I don't know what to do with them. I thought pumpkins, but I just never got to doing them. But I think they're just so precious and sweet and rustic. So I'm going to just kind of tuck those up there. And that is how I'm decorating it for fall. I have 1 basket for the girls to share. They have 1 project each. I have lots of things. Up here is my sock yarn that I didn't show before. I had one little bit that's just sock yarn specific, but I feel good. I accepted defeat and I'm being kind to myself that all of my yarn doesn't fit in this hutch. And that's okay because knitting is, besides reading books and being a mom, it's my hobby. I use it and I design things with it, and my kids are starting to fall in love with it or have been falling in love with it. If there are other places in the house that we can have it, for example, the entire sunroom has become kind of our crafting room, with it being also the sewing room. And so I'm okay with it kind of spilling over into another area of the sunroom for that yarn that's kind of the special yarn for knitting for my kids, or if they are ready to start a new project, they can come over and knit with that wool. And I know where all of my yarn is. I can look at it for some good inspiration when I'm ready to start a new project. But I think being able to accept that life is life and it's messy and it doesn't all fit in one perfect little box is just the way to go. But I hope that this was fun and inspiring for you to see how to decorate your yarn this fall.